the Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan podcast. Navigating success through uncertainty.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third instalment in our podcast series, aptly named Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan with Charlie and James. For those of you who may well have been on a different planet and missed the fabulous two previous versions of this, we better introduce ourselves. So, Charlie, a little bit about you, please.
I'm Charlie McLean-Bristol, so I'm a business continuity, crisis management, and cyber incident management person by trade, been doing that for 25 years. I just want to say this week I'm not in a boat, not in a plane or anywhere else. I'm just rather boringly sitting in my office. So there we are. That's my location today.
You could have made it a little bit more exciting by saying you'd been kidnapped, or you were in a cellar somewhere bound up, but you were still there for the podcast, really, mate. That would have been much more exciting for the listeners.
That for next month's podcast.
Next week.
Yeah.
I'm James McAllister. I've been in resilience the last 40 years, the last 10 through consultancy, but 30 years prior to that doing resilience in a policing environment. Very lucky to work all over the world with lots of exciting things, from public order, counter-terrorism, firearms, and then latterly in disaster management and dealing with large-scale disasters like earthquakes and typhoons, etc.
I just like your bit about claiming 40. I like your bit about claiming 40 years. So I only claimed 25 years, and I'm looking at this man. He obviously must have started when he was about 5. Doing business continuity. They can't
see how young looking I am. Obviously, in my loft, I do have a picture of myself which is aged. One day I'll be found out where somebody goes in and brings it down, and then I represent my true age. But for the people who know me, I am getting very grey and old looking, and turned 60 at the end of last year. So I'm not far off my actually claiming my bus pass, so I'm not that far off now. Now, today's topic is, what does a winter of industrial discontent mean for businesses, and what can we all do to prepare for it? Now, at the moment, most countries around the world either appear to be suffering or threatened by some form of industrial dispute, whether it be working to rule, strikes, or the more aggressive tactic of actually protesting. And if you look at the example of Europe, let's take the UK, long-running rail strikes, border security strikes, waste disposal strikes. The wider Europe is plagued. I mean, the French, we mentioned, Charlie and I were talking before we came on, the French will strike or protest at the drop of a hat. And there's motorway strikes, air traffic controller strikes. The Dutch, they've got transport strikes going on at the moment. And then if you go further afield, the US are caught up in rail strikes at the moment and ongoing. Now, if you look at the impact, which is the important thing to us as businesses, in the UK, stats have just been produced to say that 2.5 million working days have been lost due to rail strikes over the last 2 years. And that equates to over £5 billion worth of losses, general losses, not just due to the loss of working days. And it's hitting all industries, because it's not just if you are, working for one of the operators. The biggest hit is if you're up and down on trains all the time. So what should businesses caught in the collateral damage of these kind of strikes do to prepare themselves?
I'm maybe not as pessimistic as you of that we're going to get, particularly in autumn, discontent, because we seem to get spring, summer, autumn and winter of discontent. But I think like all business continuity, we just have to be constantly horizon scanning and just making sure that we keep an eye out for those things. We should have done our BIA, so we should understand what are our suppliers, where our supplies come from, what organizations are key to our delivery of our products and services. And I think we ought to always be, we ought to be the eyes and ears. Sometimes strikes are entirely obvious. There's a train strike, everyone knows about it on the news. But we could get strikes around a key supplier to us or a key supplier to our supplier, which could have an effect. And I always think the business continuity manager is to spend an extra eye looking out there, looking at what's going on, where's going it, flag it up. Sometimes senior managers may cotton on, sometimes they don't. And I think it's that horizon scanning and that understanding is who's striking, what we're doing, looking at the news. I was busy trying to get my company to look at the other day whether I should play for my newspaper subscriptions. That is our job, to look at those, to read the newspapers. I'm not sure I go say to the managers, I'm sorry, I'm reading the newspapers this morning. I can't come on. But it is our job to do that, whether we might probably do that in the spare time. But I think it's our job to understand what's going. I don't know what were your thoughts. So, is it just horizon scanning, or do we need to do more than that?
Well, I think looking ahead, let's look back in time. I was alive in the 70s, and I remember when Labour government gave in to any strike or anything that was going on. And I remember the power strikes of being where there was no, we were walking around with candles and there was no heating and all this kind of stuff. I know you're sort of very much, this government may well be sorting it out with the unions, but don't you think there's a possibility that if you give in too much to the unions, we then go back to the day where everybody goes, "Ooh, opportunity." It's a little bit like, you get cyber attacked and you pay your ransomware, and then everybody from around the world knows you're a soft target, and away you go. So I know, if you look at some of the strikes that were mentioned earlier, they appear to be being sorted out by, if we're looking at the UK, the government. And if you're looking at France as well, because of the right-wingism and everything else, everybody seems to be trying to appeal to the public at the moment and throw money at things that nobody's actually got. But it could turn into an event where everybody decides we're going to strike, because if we strike, we get our own way, and we get into that awful position where the one who shouts the loudest and stamps the feet gets what they want. But somewhere down the line, it is us who have to pay for it. So that was my first political moan there. But getting back to your question of horizon scanning, I'm really keen on horizon scanning. You've got to have your finger on the pulse at all times. And as you say, even though later on, we've already talked about doing a podcast on fake information versus real information and how you work out what that is. But we've got to be led by looking at what is out there. But there's this lovely word that I use regularly when I'm training called prospection. Because what happens with information is, and we know, because you're ex-military, I'm ex-police, information is floating around all the time. It's like air. It's out there. However, we've got to turn information into intelligence, because information without context is meaningless. There's shed loads of stuff out there, but what does it actually mean? And I, like you, I don't think business continuity people do enough of external looking. They're a bit focused, obsessed with internal, and a lot of them don't actually know what's on the doorstep or wider, because they never turn around and look out the window, because they're always looking inside the premises. They need to look out the window and see what's going on, what the threats and the risks are outside, and then put those pieces of the jigsaw together. Because as you know from your previous military career, nobody in the military or the police make an action without it being intelligence-led. There's no wet finger in the air, oh, let's do that because that might happen. Because in your line of business in the military, it was lives, and in my kind of business in the police, it was we had no money. So all policing was directed by intelligence and cost-benefit analysis. And isn't that the essence of business continuity?
Yeah, I think that's the essence of business continuity. And I think, just take a different slant on this. I think as business continuity people, regardless of whether you're regulated business, non-regulated, we need to sell ourselves, because if the austerity comes and if everyone spends all their money on wages for everybody else because the wages have gone up, there will be cuts, or there may be cuts. And I think if you're the business continuity manager who keeps their head down and they're busy doing their BIAs, and you occasionally surface every so often, once a year, take part in an exercise or run an exercise, when the powers that be come and say, is that guy adding value? I haven't seen him. Is he doing anything? You can have the most beautiful BIA. Does anyone ever look at it? Does anyone really care? Does anyone really care if your plans are up to date? Well, they might be beautiful, but actually the person who just changed the name, changed a couple of things at it, how does anyone know whether you're any good? But if you're trying to be relevant to your organization, and that may be difficult because you work for a large multinational organization, I don't think you can really knock on the door of the CEO. Look here, I'm one of your 100,000 employees. Look here, I am. Look, let me tell you how my view of the world is. We need to temper it, but I do think we need to add value. And if we don't seem to add value, whatever stage that is, or whatever, whether you turn out committees, or whether you do get in front of the CEO, then or you have to keep adding value. You have to go and say, look, there is a point to paying me, and actually I am doing work, I'm doing stuff there. But if you do work, it's the tree falling in the forest. If I do work and no one knows that I'm doing work, what's the point? So I think we need to add value in that horizon scanning.
Yeah, we need to get out of BC. When I first came into it, probably like yourself, 20 odd years ago, it was like Q. So if we're looking at the Bond films, Q in the basement with the gadgets, we need to be more Bond. We need to be more out there, shoving it in people's faces in a diplomatic and nice way, but we need to be doing more shaking the tree rather than sitting under it, to be honest.
Because if you take on responsibilities and you take on jobs and say, look, I'll sort that out, then people naturally give things. And we, as I said earlier, we need to add value to this organization. We need to do what we're paid to do, but we also need to look for opportunities and to promote what we do. We're there to add value. We have a purpose, and we need to make sure we show people that purpose.
But what about then? I know you spoke about suppliers, which is a massive issue. What about staff then? The buggerance factor on staff. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was working with a bank and we planned a strategic level exercise. Then there was a rail strike. So we postponed it. And you know what? Then there was a rail strike. So we postponed it. Then there was a rail strike. And in the end, we had to do it virtually. Yeah. And it just messes people around. What about those poor people who, work in a major city, who their commute is already 2 hours in and 2 hours out? And then there's a rail strike or a work to rule. Because I was on a train at Wigan and I'm thinking, great. I get off the London train, run across the road, get on my train. And then they announced everyone's going to have to get off the train because the train is unsafe. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's reasonable. And do you know why it was unsafe? Because the driver's heater wasn't working, and it's a regulation that the driver has to have a heater. So what can businesses do? Because it's collateral damage, isn't it? It's not the company haven't caused it. Someone else has caused it. But what can the company do because of the stress and the pressure on staff with being messed around with industrial disputes?
Well, I think there's two things there now. I think with the working from home, there is a lot more requirement. There is a lot more flexibility in terms of, the old day you used to have to say, oh, you all come into work to strike today. So it's almost like you can sit home and do nothing. So I think that flexibility, so that has changed. The other thing I always say, we're in a contingency business. Like if I'm ever going down to deliver something the next day, I will always go the night before, because I know that trains can fail, planes can fail, anything. And I know if all else fails, and it gets to 9 o'clock at night and I'm still in Glasgow, I've got to be in London, I can physically get in a car and I can drive. I won't be very good and it's a bit dangerous, but I can physically be there tomorrow morning to deliver. Because, you know, if you've got all those senior executives, you have this plan for 6 months, then you're not going to not turn up. And if you cut it fine, you won't do it because sod's law. And if, you know, if it really, you know, if we're going abroad, sometimes we might go 2 days early. At least get there one day. You can, the day before, you can go and see the site, you can go and speak to some people, you can go and do something, but you don't want to be paying a lot of money for your time. And it's the same with any of your events. If you really need to get staff in, then get them in the night before and pay for a hotel. That's really important. You know, it's part of your contingency planning. Luckily, with the working from home, that's easier. But, you know, we're in the contingency planning business, so we need to do our personal or our organization's contingency planning, make sure we're prepared for that.
What do we think about businesses? How do they manage the expectations of customers when the impact is caused to the customer, not by you, but by someone else who's on strike? How do you manage that? Are you happy? Because I'm very much, when I'm doing my crisis communications, we shouldn't be throwing people under the bus, because it's not good to throw people under the bus.
Activity. You're always the old one, outsource the activity, not the responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility lies with you. So I think that's difficult. I think, you know, I always think that comes down to bits of MTBDs and if you don't deliver service to your customer, how quickly does your organization fail? And you know, I'm sure you've seen the ones too. You've got 12 hours and 24 hours, and you're an organization that works 9 to 5 days a week, and you take an extended period at Christmas and you don't work the weekend. So you obviously, if you don't work for 24 hours, your organization is obviously going to fail. No. So, you know, I think, you know, if you know of a strike and, you know, there's all the rules about actually you should know in advance, then it's again contingency planning, saying actually this organization is going on strike, we need to stockpile, or we need to get things done in advance, or we need to tell our customers, or, you know, sometimes I think a lot of business continuity is about, you know, look at something like Deliveroo. Just take it as a platform. It delivers service. If it goes down, there's no manual workarounds. There's nothing. It just goes down and you get it back up and going. So, but it's still business continuity. You don't kind of go all sad, you know, it's terrible, what do we do? No, you say you manage customers' expectation, platforms down. I'm telling you straight away, because you're my customers, we will hopefully get it back in 24 hours. You know, it is about communications. And if you can't do anything about it, at least communicate with your customers. Show you're doing something. Even just by telling them shows you care. So I think it is always about, if all else fails and you can't get the system up and going, hopefully you've got a bit of time to maybe you can get something done. If not, just communicate with your customers, tell them what's going on, explain why, and then you just have to rely on a bit of goodwill, which hopefully you built up in the previous time, and say, yeah, no, these guys are good guys. You know, we're prepared to wait for 24 hours for our delivery takeaway, or not 24 hours, but, you know, we're prepared. We're not going to go swap to somebody else because they provide us good service and we're happy. So we'll just have to miss out on my delivery takeaway tonight, which I've had too many takeaways. So
do you think businesses
it'd be quite good if it happened?
No, I mean, do you think businesses do enough around? I mean, and this is my bugbear. They don't do enough around workarounds. I mean, I'll give you a ridiculous example. My wife and I were watching a program called Below Decks, which is this.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting. It's on Bravo.
I love the Below Decks.
It's great. It's good. So, you know, all these posh people go on these super yachts, and on one of them I was watching the other day, the provisioners hadn't brought rosé wine. And the people were like, we need rosé, we need rosé. And the people go, well, the provisioners haven't brought it. And I was like, get on the tender, get into port, find an off license, buy a shed load of rosé wine, bring it back, crack it open and do it. Why are we waiting for our supplier when you can get rosé wine anywhere? My God, they could have crushed grapes and made it in the time they moaned about it. And do you think we do enough around workarounds?
No, I don't think we do enough for working rounds. And I think there is sometimes, if we go back to the Deliveroo example, then, there is to work around. But I think there's often is manufacturing, there often is financing. There are a lot of process you can do manually. It might not be terribly efficient. And you might want to say, well, actually, if it's 24 hours, can I do it? Is it worth the effort doing, or am I just going to catch up, wait till the system comes up again? But I think, we need to think about those manual workarounds, and I think, we need to keep processes going. You need to sometimes it's get the old boys or girls in to actually show them how to do it. Or do you just meant to say you're going to do nothing? But, with ransomware and the cyber attacks, I was looking at some good survey and say like sort of 50% you're going to get over 7 days to recover. So you've got a lot of days there. And that's when you do need a manual workaround because, people put up for 24 hours, 48 hours. Can I come
I've got a really good example here for you. Do you think, because I'm a massive Amazon fan and I'm not on shares of Amazon.
Yeah.
But Amazon have changed, I think, customer expectation on the world. I order today online, it comes tomorrow. If I have any complaints about it, I go online, I speak to an absolutely wonderful person on the other end of the phone or on that chat thing on the and they send me a new one, and they also compensate me for me not getting it within 24 hours. Now, does Amazon set the rest of the world up to fail because no one's that good?
Yeah, I think that is, well, there is an expectation. Remember, allow 21 days for delivery. That was what everyone expected to do, and it no longer happens. So I just want to move on the conversation quickly to a point is, what's your thought in what is the role of the business continuity manager and strike planning? Because I saw this, it's happened to me a little while ago in one working for utilities and the strike, and there is the danger if you're seen as trying to mitigate the impacts of the strike, are you seen to be on the manager's side? And actually, this guy is trying to stop us having the impact on the strike. Well, at the same hand, a lot of the people you should know as business continuity, you should know the shop floor people, and you should know them personally and their jobs and what they do, as well as the manager. You should know more about the organization than anybody else in the whole organization. But, do you put that relationship in jeopardy by doing this work? Do you do it quietly? Do you do it overtly? What's your thoughts on, have you had to prepare people? What's your thoughts on the business continuity managers for mitigating strike actions?
Well, I've got to say, I've never been in an organization as an employee where I've been part of a union because I did 30 years in the cops and, all my life was in an organization where you couldn't strike, understandably for the benefit of the public.
Yeah.
In 2010, we had the public sector strikes. And my role was to look at which activities were critical with regard to being performed by non-police officers. And the two vulnerable areas were scenes of crime, because what we'd done is it was done by cops in the past, but they gave that over to the civilian side support staff, and also call takers and dispatchers, which is critical because 999 calls coming in or your normal grade B calls coming in, you need people to receive them. However, the beautiful thing of public sector strikes was we had 3 months notice. So we knew they were going to come. So we identified the fact that this is how many crime scene people we had. This is how many call takers we would need. This is what we expected the strike would look like from an impact perspective. And then what I did was I found out that we still had, I think 3 or 4 ex-crime scene police officers. So we gave them the opportunity of retraining and they jumped at it and away they went. We also looked at people who used to work in control rooms and then had been put back on the street. because it's not economically viable to have cops in control rooms. And we identified it was nearly 70, and we gave them the opportunity of retraining. And then we had them on standby the day before we knew it was going to be bad. So we brought all those people in, and the impact was minimal. Now, if there were flash strikes and things like that, maybe that wouldn't have been as easy.
But did that affect
About on your question, I don't care, because I'm there for the business. Yes, I've got mates in work, but my job is to keep our most important business activities running.
But did that affect your relationships with any of them? Because you are in the future, well, maybe not in this process, but in a business continuity manager in the future is going to rely on that business continuity coordinator to do things. And they want to be bloody minded. They can be bloody minded and not do things. So I think there is that danger. Did you keep the relationship with people even though you were trying mitigating the effects of it, right? Was that an issue or not really?
I did, because I mean, I had the benefit of saying what we don't want to do here is put the public at risk, because we were talking about potential loss of life. So it wasn't as though it was I'm making pens.
Yeah.
The people who were going on strike, I had a lot of feeling for the people who were going on strike.
Yeah.
However, they needed to know that we still needed to do life-saving activities, and we didn't do all the stuff that we were going to do, clearly, but all the 999 calls still needed to be responded to, and some of the more higher crimes and still needed to be forensically investigated, and they got that. But I can understand, Charlie, in other industries, it's all about making friends. BC is all about making friends, as we know. So that, I imagine, for some people that's quite a difficult tightrope to walk.
I think it is, because I think, if you work on a model where you've got a business continuity coordinator and you've got a whole lot of coordinators in the business whose job it is, some are beautifully enthusiastic and loving it's their wee thing that they do and they're really happy with it. Other people get volunteered for this and it's their worst nightmare and they hate it. And because you're only a middle manager, you can't order people, you're not their line manager. You can't go and say, you're going to be sacked if you don't do this. You have to rely on a lot of powers of persuasion. And I think it is, if you annoy those persons, possibly you can, then, you lose that relationship and you rely on a lot of goodwill. So Mary, I like your way of how you do it, is say, look, actually, in the end, you need this job too. So I am doing this because this is my job to be paid to do it, but I'm doing it for the greater good of the company, understand why I'm doing it, and then you maybe keep that relationship.
And I think everybody in business continuity understands that the soft skills of business continuity are, on occasions, much more important than the hard skills. The way of understanding, establishing rapport, having empathy for people's position, and working with them to a successful resolution is the key to what we do, without a doubt. Okay, Charlie, so that's it for another episode. Where does time go, hey? I'd like to thank all the listeners for being with us. In future, it would be really good if listeners could throw in ideas. If you want us to talk about, some subject, it would be great if you could just drop business continuity training a line and just let them know this is something that you might want to consider as a topic for future podcasts. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, please remember to like us and subscribe to us and comment. I mentioned on my LinkedIn page about, Charlie and I are more than happy if you want to throw tomatoes at us verbally and get into the debate on what we talk about, because it would be great to have some of your opinions on there. Share it with people. Let other people know if you've enjoyed it or hated it, because, whether you liked it or you didn't like it, sometimes it's good to listen to things that maybe you don't agree with and then get involved in the debate. So it'd be good to share us around a little bit. If you liked us, as I've mentioned, give us some positive stars on Spotify, etc. And we'll see you next time. be careful out there.